Good morning, bonjour, bonjour, Anin. I first want to start by recognizing we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people, and I want to say thank you for the welcome to this beautiful territory. I also want to acknowledge as well the many family members and survivors of violence, the elders, grandmothers, and knowledge keepers who are here with us today. I'm grateful for the guidance that so many of you have provided to us. And I want to recognize our National Family Advisory Circle, our Grandmothers Circle, and our advisory groups who have supported us and guided us throughout this work. And I want to say thank you to the elders for starting us in a good way this morning with prayer and for the lighting of the kulik. Like my fellow commissioners, I have been deeply moved by the many people who have come forward to share such devastating stories of loss with us, but who have also shown such courage, strength, and resilience. Through sharing their truths, family members and survivors of violence have shown us all the way forward. And I urge all Canadians to read our final report and the calls for justice, which includes calls for justice for all Canadians. We firmly believe that the work of the National Inquiry, including the findings and calls for justice, provides a strong basis to create a new way forward. What we are calling for is a seismic shift in thinking and action. This is about changing and renewing relationships between Canada, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I want to take this opportunity this morning to address briefly some of our findings and recommendations, our calls for justice in the area of human security. We have found that Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people experience social and economic marginalization and exclusion as a direct result of colonial and racist and sexist government policies that violate their social, economic, and political rights, and that jeopardize their right to human security and, in turn, to safety. The Canadian state has caused Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people to be removed from their homelands, their communities, and their families. They experience disproportionately high rates of poverty and insurmountable barriers in obtaining secure housing, food, education, employment, transportation, and other basic needs. Indigenous children and the elderly are especially vulnerable under these circumstances. And this marginalization and exclusion decreases safety and increases the risk of violence. It often forces Indigenous women, girls, and trans and two-spirit people to remain in violent and unsafe situations, or to end up in violent and unsafe circumstances in an attempt just to have their basic needs met. So some of the calls for justice that we have made in the area of human security include that all governments uphold the social and economic rights of Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people by ensuring that Indigenous peoples have services and infrastructure that meet their social and economic needs, and that all governments immediately ensure that Indigenous peoples have access to basic needs like housing, clean drinking water, and adequate food. With respect to housing, we call upon all governments to ensure that Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people have access to housing that is safe, that's appropriate to geographic and cultural needs and available wherever they reside. As well, we call for the establishment and long-term sustainable funding of Indigenous-led, low-barrier shelters, safe spaces, transition homes, second-stage housing, and services for Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people wherever they reside. We also call for the provision of supports and resources for education, for training, and employment opportunities for all Indigenous peoples, women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ people in particular, within all communities. We also call for safe and affordable transit and transportation services and infrastructure for Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people living in remote and rural communities. So those are some of the calls for justice related to human security that I wanted to highlight this morning. So what has crystallized for all of us through the National Inquiry is that government departments and agencies can no longer invent and impose one-size-fits-all systems. Family members and survivors have shown us that grassroots, community-based solutions must be welcomed as the new normal. All governments must support and resource community-based solutions designed to improve social and economic security, led by Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQI people, with long-term sustainable funding to meet the needs and objectives as defined by Indigenous peoples and communities, recognizing Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination in the pursuit of economic and social development. And we also need to understand that this work will look different in different communities, as each First Nation, Métis, and Inuit community is unique. In closing, we have the opportunity now to make the necessary changes to ensure the safety of Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people for generations to come. Through our concrete actions, let's honor and give life to the truth. Chimigwich, merci. Thank you.